Last June, at the 2019 Cannes Lion Festival for Creativity, Procter and Gamble premiered a short film called The Look, which directly addressed the unconscious bias a young black man faces during an ordinary day, taking his son to school, dining alone in a restaurant, and shopping in a boutique. The film, a conversation guide, and other discussions led by the company aim to foster empathy, raise awareness, and enable changes in hearts and minds about racial bias. For a multinational corporation whose personal care and laundry brands are used every day around the world, investing marketing and PR resources to address such an important issue might seem out of place, but Procter & Gamble has long practiced what it preaches. Today in our PR Future discussion with Damon Jones, Chief Communications Officer for Procter & Gamble, we learn about the importance of creating consumer connections in a variety of communities and why P&G's engagement on social issues contributes greatly to their corporate success.
Well, for us, it starts with the consumer. Everything that we do is based on what the consumers tell us that they want, what they believe is right, and then we add on top of that what we believe we can do to be a positive force for society. So we know today that consumers now more than ever want to understand the values of the brands and the products that they buy and that they believe in. So it's not enough just to have a great performing product and to deliver it at a great price and for consumers to think that they're getting a great value. People want to know, how are you treating your employees? Are you paying fair wages? Are you a responsible company for the environment? Those are things that we know do impact purchase decisions. They do impact our ability to attract and retain good talent. And so we're very conscious in each of those areas.
Welcome to PR Future, the podcast that delivers interesting insights into the dynamic world of public relations. Our first episodes address the findings of our 2020 Global Communications Survey. We previously looked at the world of new activism through the lens of three prominent activists. This week, we examine the topic from the point of view of a corporation that actually has a point of view. I'm Fred Cook from the USC Annenberg Center for Public Relations, and this is PR Future. I spoke with Damon Jones while his team and ours were in the middle of the COVID-19 work-from-home quarantine. Our discussion occurred before the protests arose from the killing of George Floyd. Damon has been with P&G for over 20 years, but this is his first as the company's Chief Communications Officer. His battlefield promotion came at the onset of the pandemic, at a time when he believes communications has never been more important.
I can't think of, a different time when communications has been so critically important to not only our organization, but how, frankly, people are relating to each other at a very informational exchange level, but also at a human emotional level. It's been kind of baptism by fire, as I said, but it's given me, kind of a unique window to see not only how P&G's responding, each of our 97,000 employees responding to a very real human challenge, but also how the world is responding and the importance of us having very constructive engagements with a wide variety of stakeholders. So a very steep learning curve, but so far I think it's off to a great start. I've been with P&G 23 years now and in a variety of positions. I've had to work in 3 different cities here in the U.S., 2 different countries in Europe, and had broad geographic responsibility for our Asia business when I was in Singapore. So the benefit, even though I've been with a single company, feel like I've had many different opportunities to learn about the field, to practice, and to really understand that we have a lot more in common than we might think. And it really comes down to, I think, a company's ability to understand its audiences, to communicate with them effectively, and learn how to listen and really integrate what it is that we're listening and learning in a way that helps us build and maintain relationships with the audiences who are most important. And for us, that's the business of consumers. So whether you're in Texas or Thailand and you're buying Pantene shampoo, you probably have a lot in common, more than you might think.
And in your last job, part of your title was advocacy. What does advocacy mean inside P&G?
Well, for us, it is about using our voice in a very powerful way. We are one of the world's largest advertisers. We serve more than 5 billion consumers every day, and we touch them many times throughout the day. So the number of opportunities that we have to deliver a message is huge, but to deliver a message in the right way can have a lasting impact, because we know that advertising has a real big impact on the way that communities view themselves and they view each other. So even when you think about, for our portfolio, which is largely in the household cleaning products business, simply, how we show men and women. What are the roles that we show them in a commercial for laundry detergent like Tide or Dawn dish soap? You would go back 25 years and you would only see women using Tide, or you would only see women using Dawn in a commercial. That, imagine being a young boy or young girl growing up and seeing that commercial, you might think that, household work was only the job of women. We know that's not the case. So for us, advocacy starts with portraying all people in a very real and accurate manner, but it means carrying out really that responsibility to tell powerful stories in powerful, accurate, and positive ways that have a positive impact on society. Occasionally, that also means standing up for what we believe is right in a way that some people may not always feel that is the proper role for a company to take. And so my job leading our advocacy portfolio is to help make some choices. Where are those areas where we want to take a stand? How do we do that in a way that's constructive and brings people together? But also, how do we ensure that we're doing the right things day in and day out that lead us to be the kind of company that people want to work for, that people want to buy from, and that people want to invest in?
For a company like Procter and Gamble, doing business on multiple continents and communicating about dozens of brands, the opportunities for advocacy are virtually endless. And as Damon says, so are the potential consumer reactions.
Consumers react differently to different conversations depending on the context, right? So what one person might feel is a very heartfelt acknowledgement. We know that other consumers might feel that that's a conversation we don't have a business playing in. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we launched a video called The Talk. And The Talk was a video that basically told the story of how a mother, in this case a black mother, was having conversations with her children about the realities of racism in the world, right? And when we ran that video, we got a couple of different reactions. There was a large group of consumers that said, "Hey, that's a great video. Thank you. That's my life. I can really understand and relate to that." There was another group of consumers who reacted to that and said, "Ooh, wow, never really recognized that that was a dynamic that was at play." And there was a third group of consumers that said, "Wait a minute, P&G, you don't have a right to play in that conversation." And they accused us of race baiting in so many different words, right? And so, that was a moment of truth. And we stepped back and we said, okay, wait a minute, and this is a company that, we like to keep people happy, right? Who do we ever want to be mad at Tide as a brand? But we recognized that this was an important conversation that needed to happen when you take into context everything that was happening in the U.S. at the time. Race has always been a difficult issue for us to talk about. But our belief is if we can find constructive ways to have that conversation, then we can bring people together. And we can't get to a better place in this country until we're able to talk about it. So in some respects, it was controversial for others. For other people, they live, being a black mother, raising your child in a very difficult society every day. So it wasn't as tough for them. But we had to take into account that not everyone started in the same place. And our job as a communications organization, as a marketer, and as a company that serves consumers was to figure out how do we bring people to the table such that they can have a very constructive conversation.
But Damon says that meaningful campaigns with the power to start conversations can only be effective when corporations that are creating them have a diverse set of perspectives.
We can't expect to have a conversation in broad society on take this topic of race unless we can have a very candid conversation about race internally, right? So those conversations start inside with bringing people of different backgrounds together to talk about it, right? And understanding that not everyone will see the issues in the same ways, but if we can really have deep, meaningful dialogue and not resort to name calling and to some of the way you see these debates play out on social media, that we can always learn from each other, I think we'll get to a better place. Personally, I've always been kind of a person that's leaned into difficult conversations. But when we know that, you can get into some of these and have safe space for dialogue, you find that many people want to come to the table. When we've done these topics on the issues of race or gender, we literally get hundreds and thousands of people from across our company that want to lean in and have these discussions because they're having them, frankly, in the communities and over their dinner table. So, who's to say you can't have them in the workplace? Personal values play a big role in that because, again, you bring your whole self to work. I'm a black man in America, right? And there are certain realities that come along with that. When I have a conversation at work as it relates to a piece of advertising, for example, that's the perspective that I bring. And, I'm thankful to work for an organization who wants me to bring that unique perspective because we'll get, 8 or 9 different perspectives around the table. And what we come out of that room with will be better because we each are bringing that lived experience.
Employee activism is on the rise. They care more and more about the actions and policies of the companies they work for. How does P&G deal with so many employees who probably have a million different opinions about every topic?
It's funny that you ask about that in the topic of activism, because I would argue that my 97,000 P&G colleagues are my toughest critics and they are my toughest customers. And it starts from understanding that, they want to be sure that when they go home and talk to their family or their neighbor, they can, put the badge of P&G on and feel like the company's done the right thing. And so we've got a culture where people can ask any question and get the answer. I think that holds us to a degree of transparency that is constructive. And while there may be disagreements on certain aspects of what we're doing, we're very clear on the reason why we do what we do. We believe that supporting the environment is the right thing to do in our own self-interest and in the interest of the communities where we live and work. We believe equity and inclusion is hugely important because it leads to better business decisions and it puts us in a better position to serve the consumers. Internally, our CEO has, a global webcast 4 times a year, and every employee has an opportunity to ask whatever question they want. That not only extends beyond the CEO, it extends down deep into the organization. On our intranet, every time we publish a piece of news, there's an open comment section that's right there. So we try to make that very deliberate and make that a part of our culture, that's something that, is not only okay, it's something that's encouraged, because we believe that, the more points of view that we have, the more diverse points of view that we have, we'll get to a better decision.
And when you're looking at all these different perspectives, do you engage with activist groups on different topics to get their perspective on which way to go or what you think is the right thing to do?
We use the word activist group in a very broad context, right? Our goal when we put out any type of communication or advertisement is to make sure that we're getting as broad perspective from as many different people as possible. We know that sometimes living in corporate America, we can be in a bit of a bubble, right? So to the degree that we can bring in voices from people that see the world differently, who live in different communities, who approach just issues in life differently, we're going to be better, right? So everything that we do has to start from a position of listening. And sometimes that means listening and proactively going after people who have a different point of view. And the goal is not always to change one person's mind or change one person's opinion. It's to understand where they're coming from. And so we do regularly embrace different groups with different points of view. You can look at what we've done in the area of animal rights over the years. You can look at what we've done in the area of the environment. We don't agree with Greenpeace on everything, but we do agree that there are opportunities to improve on a number of key issues that are important to us, right? So we are going to be transparent in what we can do and what we can't do, but more importantly, try to ensure that we're getting to the why, right? And finding that bit of common ground. And once you find that common ground, chances are your differences are more about how will you get to an ideal state, not whether, you want to get to that ideal state. So embracing different points of view is part of our DNA, and I would argue it should be a part of the DNA of any effective organization.
We just did this survey, which you've seen at USC about activism, and we found that only a small percentage of people in your roles at other companies engage with activists who have an opinion about these topics. And I wonder if you had a thought on why people are reluctant to do that.
I think for those that don't actively engage, not only does it sometimes come from a fear, but it sometimes comes from a place of thinking that you have to be perfect to engage, right? When you take an issue such as race or gender, and we have, very broad aspirations to be 50-50 men and women at every management level in our company. And, right now we're at 48, right? But we're not going to let being at 48 and not yet being to 50 stop us from being a vocal advocate of gender equality. We've got some gaps in racial representation in our company. That doesn't stop us from advocating for the right things from a race relations perspective. So I think there's a degree of humility that's important in that consideration. But it's also, what I would say is when we sit down and try to have these conversations, our goal is not to prove that we are right or that we are good or that we're better, but to really share our commitment that we want to be better than where we are today, right? And that we actually need different points of view and different people to help us get there. And I think when you can start in a place where people know that you genuinely want to do the right thing. And when I look at some of our toughest issues, you can take animal rights. When I joined the company, 23 years ago, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals protested outside our annual shareholder meeting every year. They were out there in bunny suits saying, P&G, you bad company. Over the past couple of years, they've lauded us as one of the most responsible companies in animal rights in any company in the world. That's become the situation because of decades of continued dialogue, decades of finding common ground, decades of us sharing the science, and decades of us opening up and sharing what we know and them sharing what they know. In that case, the common ground was, we did want a commitment to end animal research. There were things that we didn't know how to do scientifically. There was legislation that we needed to lobby on together. None of those things would have happened had we, simply closed our doors and said, you're right or we're wrong, or vice versa. They came through dialogue. So I think just a commitment to learning, to listening, and to constantly trying to be in a better place is what helps take some of the sting out of those traditionally, sometimes combative relationships.
Our survey showed that activism has been growing for the last 5 years, the influence, and people believe it will continue to grow into the future. And the primary reason was sort of a disillusionment with government, that government wasn't providing the leadership role, and activists and consumers are looking to business to do that. What advice would you give to activist groups who are interested in working with companies like P&G to help build those relationships, which in the past might have been adversarial?
Well, I think we often refer to ourselves at P&G as trying to be a force for good and a force for growth. And that comes from understanding the integrated nature of the stakeholders that we serve. We're a publicly traded company. We have a duty and a responsibility to do the right thing for our share owners. At the same time, serving a share owner does not come at the expense of doing what's right for a consumer, an employee, or the environment, for example. Sometimes we have people that come to us and they're really hot on a particular issue and say it may be something to do with advertising. I would say sometimes they approach us thinking only about the opportunity to change P&G and what P&G is doing with, our advertising spend, which is quite significant. But again, if we can enroll and partner on a cause where we can influence the broader industry as a whole, which is something that we've done through a lot of our efforts, then there's a lot more at stake, right? So really understanding and clarifying what does success look like, and then how do you find common ground in creating a better environment and a better tomorrow. You go back to this issue of racial or gender equality. We know that there are hundreds of millions of dollars of GDP that can be achieved once gender equality and racial equality are achieved, right? So in those instances, that's something that's not just in the best interest of a single company or a single organization. That's in the best interest of the world.
We found that the perception of activists is that they're out protesting to build awareness for a cause, but they're not capable of creating really long-term change. But when we talk to the activists, they are less interested in protesting and more interested in creating long-term change through voting and mobilizing voters and the existing political process. How do you feel about this long-term aspect of creating real change against some of these goals?
Part of what we've seen, at least in my role over the past 4 or 5 years, is that many different people recognize that there is an opportunity for us to work together. Part of it is when you look at just the economic power of business and our ability to reach consumers, we can be some of the most effective partners for activist organizations. I think that's a bit of a reframe, and some of the more mature organizations are looking at companies as routes to implement, whether it's new environmental policies and practices. I mean, you go back, 10 years ago, it was, activists really relying on government legislation to be a primary barometer of change. One of the things that proves out, that similar point is in the environmental space. I mean, P&G makes a ton of products. Many of those products are single-use products. Working with a number of third parties, they've been coaching and advising us to do more in the area of recyclability for years. But rather than looking at, simply what was the recycled content in, a Tide bottle, for example, we got down to a discussion on what were some of the barriers. And one of the barriers was the fact that there was no economy out there for recycled plastic. Long story short, we're now in the business of inventing technology that takes post-consumer recycled waste, developed a chemistry that takes out the impurities and takes out the odors and takes out color and can deliver almost virgin-like quality plastic from plastic that might be thrown away on a beach or into a landfill. That's creating a circular economy. But those types of solutions come from real dialogue. So it's not just about, use paper versus plastic. It's about understanding the business model that needs to exist for real change to take hold in a marketplace.
We asked corporate communicators, PR people, whether they thought of themselves as activists, and about 25% said yes. Would you call yourself an activist in that sense?
I've never really used the word activist to describe myself. I mean, I do describe myself as an advocate. First and foremost, I want our company to be one of the most in-touch companies in the world. And we know our consumers are increasingly more diverse in any number of areas. What is smart from an advocacy standpoint is smart from a business standpoint. It's also incredibly important that people see themselves represented by the brands and the companies that they're buying, right? And we know that there's economic driver there. And so I think the fact that that is both the right thing to do and the right business thing to do is a good thing, right? And so we're always trying to find the mix and what's the win-win there. And we make no apologies that doing the right thing for society is in fact the right thing to do for business. A rising tide lifts all boats, and we like that since we're the people that make tide. When you have a more well-represented set of people behind the camera, in the case of advertising, you get better stories in front of the camera. I mean, just a few years ago, we did some research with the Association for National Advertisers, and we found that there was a significant of commercials, even, in these times, that still diminished women or had some degree of machismo in the commercial, to simplify, right? And, that's not surprising when you have 85+% of people who are directing commercials are men, right? The easiest way to get more accurate and more representative stories is to have more women in writers' rooms, to have more women producers, and have more women directors, right? So a lot of what we're doing is trying to say, okay, great, let's change the ecosystem in the industry in which we're participating in to therefore change the output. You can see similar thing in terms of our supplier diversity efforts, right? If we really want greater economic equality, we need to be buying from more small businesses. We need to be buying from more minority and women-owned businesses. So really trying to make sure that that view for equality and equity and inclusion runs throughout every aspect of our business. When we bring in a new advertising agency, for example, that advertising agency walks in with a very homogeneous looking group of people, they're likely not going to be the ones to get the business. We're very open about that. So, using our dollars and putting our money where our mouth is an incredibly important part of how we stand up and create the right tomorrow that we want to live in.
As P&G works to break gender stereotypes and foster economic equity, they've also recently used their platform to educate. During the pandemic, they've created PSAs offering guidance to the public on proper distancing practices through their campaigns.
We're also using advertising to deliver public health messages. We've done a number of social campaigns on TikTok and Twitter, encouraging people to practice the right social distancing. There are times when that type of PSA works. There's times when people want to be reminded of everything that's going on around them. And there's times when, frankly, people don't want to be reminded of that. So it's a mix. It starts with trying to figure out how can we be of service to consumers. So if you watch, some of the advertising you see on Pampers, mothers are really concerned about many things, like how do they get their prenatal classes done in an environment where they can't go and be at the hospital or be at their community center. So we've turned that advertisement from here's why Pampers is a better diaper to online information that helps educate moms on here's how you can still care for your unborn child or a young child in a world where physical distancing is the norm.
It's so refreshing to hear many of your comments. Obviously, you and the company you work for have a very progressive point of view on this, more than most, I would say. When you look out into the future, 5 years, 10 years from now, how do you see this relationship between corporations and issues and the people that represent those issues, the activists? Where do you see that going?
My hope is in the industries and in corporate America in general, we get to a better sense of balance. We can be unapologetic that, businesses are for-profit institutions, but being for-profit does not mean that you're being for-profit at the expense of others. I think the activist community has, in fact, woken up to the fact that companies can be some of their biggest allies and alliances. I mean, you look at someone like Bill Gates. When Bill Gates can get behind a cause, he not only brings money, he brings credibility. He brings other people behind him. You look at people like Howard Schultz and some of the things that he's done. And so when you look at the ability for corporate leaders with their right partnerships to stand up and to lead some of the most important issues of our day, I think it's going to be undeniable the positive impact that we're having. And so it's something that I hope to be a part of that change. But I think we're recruiting younger employees for whom that is their mission, right? Yes, they want to be successful in business, but they really want to be successful in life. And that success is defined by, leaving this world a better place. And that starts with, the building that they go into work to every day.
It's obvious from this conversation, which has been so wonderful. You've worked at P&G for a long time, but you remain very passionate about the company and these causes. What sustains you in that role?
For me, I do see a lot of connectivity in what is important to me as a human being, what's important to me as a leader, and what's important to the company and the causes that I care about. And for me, it's always been about trying to find the interconnectedness of all of those, right? A few years ago, I was fortunate enough to take a leave of absence from P&G to serve as the communications director for the Democratic National Convention in 2008. I was living in Europe at the time to kind of go back and eat pizza and drink Mountain Dew and work all kinds of crazy hours. And I did it and loved every minute of it, right? Because you were working for a cause that you believed in. And I left that experience having learned a lot. I also learned that I didn't want to do politics full time. I saw a lot of common ground between your ability to work for an organization whose values that you believe in, to work for an organization whose values you didn't have a problem advocating for. And to me, I think I want to be a part of an organization that when I leave work, I don't necessarily have to take on a uniform because I'm proud of the uniform that I've worn all day. Work is an important part of my life, and I want to make sure that I'm having a positive impact, during the day and when I go home at night. So just really wanting to have that type of alignment in life because I think it's the type of thing that sustains happiness.
Well, you are lucky to have a job that is so compatible with the way you feel. And Al Golan used to say, if you find the job you want, you'll never work a day in your life. If listeners to our podcast want to find more about the kind of work that P&G does in the community and society, where would they go to look for that?
The easiest way is we're really transparent in what we share on our Twitter feed, or also on our website. So pg.com or at Procter and Gamble, or follow me at Damon D. Jones on Twitter. I'm unabashed in sharing the great work that we're doing. And again, like I said, the important thing I think to take away is we're an organization that is trying to do the right thing in partnership with many others. As an individual and as a company, we know we don't have all of the right answers, but we believe the only problems that we can't solve are the ones we don't know about and the ones we don't talk about. So it's a dialogue that's ongoing, but it really is for us about just trying to stand up and be a force for good and a force for growth. And that's a journey, not a destination.
And we couldn't agree more. The whole point of our report was there's an opportunity here for people with different points of view to work together to solve really big problems that'll be beneficial to all of us.
Well, hey, it's a worthy cause, a worthy mission, and one I'm happy to partner with you on. So really appreciate you having me here today.
And thank you for your time, Damon. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Damon's work at Procter and Gamble signifies a willingness to partner with activists and a desire to represent diverse perspectives. And P&G's commitment to social justice continues to shine through its recent campaigns. On June 10th, in the midst of a nationwide protest following the killing of George Floyd, they released a new video called The Choice, a continuation of the Take on Race series that the company started with The Talk and The Look. The Choice calls for white allyship for the Black community and action over observation. 8 days later, they recognized Pride Month with the release of The Pause, which discusses the fear that members of the LGBTQ community often face when expressing their identities. Leading with compassion, they're working for a brighter, more inclusive future. Thanks for tuning in to PR Future, a progressive podcast created for PR professionals by PR professionals. To learn more, tap the link in the show notes to download your copy of New Activism. And subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Today's episode was produced by Ron Antoinette, Zazu Lippert, and Manuelita Maldonado, all from the USC Center for Public Relations. And I'm your host, Fred Cook, and this is PR Future.